Welcome back to the Outcast Intellectual Podcast, where we once again managed to coordinate our schedules in order to talk about intellectual things for an extended period of time, which actually I think the last episode we did together was, I think, the longest one I've done
We did like
because
2 hours or more.
yeah, we talked for 2 hours on camera, and then I'm pretty sure when we caught up after the fact, it was like another hour. So
I think so. Yeah, you're right.
you literally could have watched the normal version of Return of the King during the time that during our Zoom call. So, but listening to us talk is also engaging, particularly today when we're not going to be talking about the relationship stuff as much this time. We are going to be talking about the spectrum of stupidity, aka wokeness, because and the hilarious thing is that we're doing this live streaming it to Facebook. So it's a good thing we're eloquent, because otherwise we'd be down like Tom Jones or whatever that guy's name is. Alex Jones?
Yes.
That was on YouTube.
Hopefully he's gonna have a heart attack at any moment, and I don't know how he hasn't. Maybe
he's literally like the fat, like suburban stereotypical white guy version of like Macho Man Randy Savage. He's like, oh, he's on the edge of the boiling point. He's like the really unintimidating, so
which is unfortunate because he does say some things that I'm like, yeah, but like he's so extreme that I'm like, well, I can't really touch it.
Well, if you're, more on the, and I hate when people talk about left to right, like whatever, because it's like don't you have your own opinion? It's like, that's why you have to be conservative. That's why you need to be, it's like, dude, like, and, dude meaning the universal unisex term of dude. It's like you, because as we look at things, it's like, it's hard to imagine falling into a camp and just being like, oh, this is the case. Like, you know what I mean? Like, oh, because this, then that. Like,
because they said it, I have to believe it. Well, my side says this, so this is what I believe. No.
Right. Just because you have a given stance on abortion doesn't mean you need to have a given stance on like gun rights or whatever it is. And yeah. I mean, they're even like in different countries or whatever, it's not even going to be the same thing, because, in the UK, I don't think anybody can own a gun. And so it's, aside from maybe, like a police officer may be able to have it like at home or something. I'm not sure. So either way, there's going to be like the diversity there, but diversity, it's funny considering the topic. But yeah, I think one of the main reasons why I originally wanted to like start doing this is because like you only ever hear this generic side or that generic side. And so like whenever you hear somebody criticizing like all the things that like the woke people are doing, well, then they start talking about like how we need to bring like religion back into schools and shit like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not always the case, but like so my point here being is that like anybody who is more on the, the woke end of things or whatever, who's maybe a little bit more open-minded to understand that we are not the right talking crap about the left. We are people who think, criticizing people who don't think. And in this case, the wokeness element is more in the crosshairs.
And I mean, to be fair, I used to be like left. I'd be like, yep, 100% left. Now I'm like, oh, you're all are fucked up.
Right. Exactly. Two wings of the same bird, so to speak.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think
I'm right in the middle wave.
That's kind of, it's got to be in the sense of like, because it's always going to be a matter of balance. Like you think of like just any time in people's lives, generally they tend towards one extreme, and then inevitably that doesn't work out. And so what do? They go to the other extreme, and that doesn't work out either. And then over time, they just kind of figure out the balance, but that's always going to be the answer.
Yeah, it's like a pendulum. It's like, well, no, fuck that. We're going to go this way now. And then it's like, why? Just, swing a little shorter.
The balance is the back and forth, not either side.
Exactly.
And I think it's a big manifestation or representation of like kind of the warped nature of people's ideas these days, that you either have like people who it's like you either have to believe that like every single identity that somebody might hold has to be valid, or you have to be like Ben Shapiro. You know what I mean? I'm not, I haven't made a point of going out and researching every little person's like talking points or whatever. So, maybe I'll say something that you would probably be more of aware of it than me. I don't know how much you have followed it or followed that stuff now, but
I mean, I love Ben Shapiro, but like
yeah.
I also, and I don't always agree with him, but that's
Right.
why I love him. You know
Like
what
you
I
have
mean?
your own opinion.
I know, how dare I?
And
But
that's,
because he's good at, he backs his arguments up, you know what I mean? And he's firm in his beliefs, and I have so much respect for that, even if I don't agree. I agree with him on a lot of things, but not everything. But I still absolutely respect his opinion and his approach to it, because he's as kind of firm and like strong-winded and worded as he is. I still find him very rational. So he's somebody that I can listen to, even if I don't agree. I'm like, that makes absolute sense. I just simply don't agree,
right.
And then I love how he just like destroys the people who are like, oh, well, do you even have a degree in this? And he's like, do you? They're like, well, I'm a student. And they're like, okay.
Right.
Like he just, the people, the woke people, who want to come at him with these, well, what about this idea or that idea? And it's just like, you're not even did you even think about your argument? Because it doesn't sound like you did. It sounds like you sat at home, oh, I'm going to say this to him and it's going to get him. And you didn't even think more of it into that. It's like people are just adopting perspectives and opinions based on what it's the right thing to do. And if you're not totally accepting everybody, well, we're not going to accept you. They're tolerant, but not tolerant at all. They're tolerant as long as you're on their side.
Exactly. And that's pretty much all viewpoints, it seems, these days, where it's like, and I think that's like, it seems like usually my experience with things is always like a bad experience, like first off, and then like I'll be aware that just tends to happen with me. And so I try not to give too much, like, give too much to that impression, because it just always seems to happen. So for example, because this was probably like a decade, maybe 2 decades. No, not 2 decades ago. We're not that old yet, but it was only a decade ago, not 2 decades ago. But I remember when he was first kind of coming on to the whole social media thing, where like people were starting to know about him. It was around the same time as like Jordan Peterson was getting well known. To the majority of people. I'm sure he was well known in the scientific community already. But like, knowing that Ben Shapiro was religious, and then he also said the facts don't care about your feelings, I was like, okay, you do realize that like you just shot yourself in the foot with like a nuclear laser, right? So, and again, like I have, a lot of religious people that I like, and like I have nothing against their beliefs. It's just like, if you're going to be that, I'm not going to say opinionated, but like that outspoken about your way of looking at things, and if you're going to be trying to be rational all the time, I mean, the whole thing about religion is that it's non-rational, it's based on faith, right? So don't.
It was actually, I heard him say something very interesting. If I can find it, I'll send it to you, because I was like thoroughly impressed with how he addressed it, because someone said something about God or whatever, and the way he came at it, I was like, okay, I agree with you, because he didn't make it about like, a supreme being in the sky or whatever. Like he really made it about just like, basic like universal energy kind of thing. He's like, there's a force field, there's something that's connecting everybody. He's like, that's undeniable. He's like, that's scientific fact. He's like, whether you want to call that God or whatever it is to you. I was like, oh, okay, there's the rationale that I like in you, because
Right.
It just made sense at that point. He's like, clearly there's stuff that we don't understand. He's like, and whatever that means to you. I was like, cool. All right, cool. You won me on that one now.
Yeah.
I'm not as firm on his stances, like with abortion. He seems to be really like against that. So I'm like, ooh.
Right. Yeah, I mean, yeah, and that's again why like I try to not, because it's funny, I never have a problem like sharing my point of view, particularly because I know that it doesn't matter. Like if I say something somebody doesn't agree with or that makes them uncomfortable, like it doesn't matter. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, fuck me then. Okay,
Yeah.
fine, whatever. Okay, but the at the same time, like I am actually very aware that like my perspective is simply my perspective. And of course that's important to me because I'm not going to devalue my own perspective. That would be stupid. Um, like it's stupid to me when people think that like you are not allowed to have your own isolated form of value without understanding that the logical connection of that is that nothing you believe matters because you don't matter because you don't have your own value. Because again, they don't follow that train of thought. Um, but it is just, I guess, because it is extremely topical then, uh, because of everything that happened recently. Granted, I don't know what happened recently. I just know that everybody's been complaining about it. But when it comes to like abortion and stuff like that, I think that's probably one of the simplest ways of like just kind of pointing out like the issue that keeps happening. Because, for example, I don't think many people would argue that if like as the most extreme example, say that like the baby's already dead or whatever, and carrying it to term or whatever it would be. I'm obviously a super expert on pregnancy. Um, you know, Either way, like if it would like kill the, I don't know, I wonder if you would call them the mother if the child would be born stillborn. I don't like, I don't know how that works. Like,
Yeah, you still would, absolutely.
okay, I don't know what the classification would be if it's already dead. Already getting super morbid. Hopefully,
But
but
that's the case though, and I think like the laws that are happening now are saying that you will have to carry it to term. Like, I don't agree with that. I also don't agree with aborting, a healthy child after, say 3-4 months. You know what I mean? Like, if you've known, I know things happen, but if you change your mind at a certain point, at that point, I'm like, maybe you should go through with it and put it up for adoption or something. You know what I mean? Like, absolutely, your right to choose. And if you don't want the baby, absolutely, you don't have to have one. Like, that is your right. But I think after a certain date, it should be handled differently. Like, I don't think it should be used as a form of birth control. Like that's not okay. That I don't think that's okay. But there's a lot of situations where there's something wrong with the baby or the mother's life is at risk, or who knows, a million situations that I can't even think of because I'm not in them.
yeah.
Those need to be taken into consideration. And a lot of these laws now are saying that they're not. And that's what I'm not okay with. Like, up to a certain point, I'm not like anti-choice. I'm not, pro-life. I'm not any of that. It's just be reasonable about it. Don't
Right.
decide at 7 months, oh, he left me and now I'm not doing this by myself and I'm gonna.
Right.
I agree in you're right in your decision in your body, but at that point, I don't think
the philosophy of it, like
yeah.
like the ethics that are separate from, because, and I think that's another thing about like to kind of use it as a case study, which is that it is a nuanced topic because at what point, for example, to say that a woman should be able to have a choice, like the choice in what happens to her body, values her life in some sense, right? Because otherwise it wouldn't matter, just to look at it rationally. But then that's assuming that human lives have, I'm not going to say human lives matter because I should probably put that in the talking points. That's okay. So if human life inherently has value, at what point does it develop that value? Because that is when, okay, so if the woman's been pregnant for X number of months, then at what point does it stop being just her body and start also being a matter of the other person? Because it's like you'd think of a situation where I mean, you could say for this is a big jump, but like all of our lives are our own lives, so we should all be able to choose if we don't want to be alive, like as if somebody took that stance. But if you are in the car with a child maybe don't drive off a cliff. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so as an extreme example, like
No, but I
extreme
think that
example.
makes perfect sense. Like, I don't even think that's extreme. I think that it is what it is. Like, if you want to unalive yourself, I mean, that's ultimately up to you. I
Right.
think that's your own personal decision, but you shouldn't be taking down a whole car of people with you. You
Right.
know, I don't think that's extreme. I think that's a very good example.
And then the question becomes, at what point are we talking about, uh, a child being in the car versus, I don't know, a photo album, like it's a metaphor. So like I think that's a big question because, but the issue is that the way people debate, which is really just glorified arguing, is that you'll have a thing where like I saw somebody who'd like shared like a feed or whatever, and she was like talking about, oh, whatever the operation is, the guys can get done so that they can't like, so that they're not, it doesn't make them sterile, but I don't know what it is about it that like, it's something that's reversible or whatever that, so that they can't get a woman pregnant to begin with.
Oh, this vasectomy.
Yeah, okay. I knew that it was something with a vi in it, whatever, but I also didn't know if it would be like the one where when they like open somebody up while they're still alive. So I think they're kind of similar in terms of whatever. So I didn't want to say it wrong, but and so she was saying, that guys can do this. It's quick. It's not invasive or whatever. So, so like stop being such a bitch. Stop making girls do all this stuff. It's like, okay, the thing is that abortion and that are related, but not the same thing. And so by making it a connected idea, it's like, it's what so many people do with everything is that they sidestep the responsibility associated with their own situation and try to put it on the other person to make them, first of all, for themselves to just project it over there so they don't need to feel like it's their problem. And second, to put other people on the back foot so that it can just be, oh, well, why didn't you this? Why didn't you that? Why didn't you, you know what I mean? The pissed off girlfriend thing. You know what I mean?
It's like, oh, well, you're not going to tell me what to do, but let me reverse it so I can tell you what to do. And it's like, no, you're not solving any fucking problems. You're just
right.
arguing. That's not a solution. It's not anything. You're just bringing up something else to fight about,
Exactly.
But like, what if it's so complicated because say the woman doesn't want the kid, but the man does. How does he have no say?
Right.
I guess it's her body. Like I absolutely do. But at the same time, that's his kid that he wants. And if you don't want it, lady, give it to him after, like you, at that point, you made the decision, you know what I mean? Like, and I'm not your decision you're deciding to have sex. So that means you're agreeing to have a baby. But I mean, at what point do you have to talk about those things, the person you're having relations with?
Responsibility.
Like,
yeah.
Like if I don't want one and I'm going to sleep with somebody and use protection or not use protection and I end up pregnant and that person wants a child. Well, then what?
Right.
Oh, my body, too bad for you. I don't know that I agree with that. I have to. I don't know. Like it's
right. It's going to be contextual. Right.
So it's like my body, my choice. Yes, but there's other people severely impacted by it.
Right.
Do they not matter?
That kind of applies to like using the example of suicide again, where it's like, okay, like it's your life. You should be able to choose if you want to be alive or not. But of course, whether or not you are alive, once you've been alive, does have an impact on other people. So it's like, now, does that mean that it is not still your life? No, but it does mean that you don't get to do that in isolation, that it doesn't exist in a vacuum and that it doesn't affect other people. And I think the big thing that people don't want to address is that the main reason for most of this is just a lack of emotional maturity. Because people are saying, this is what I want. And I don't care what you want. I have the right to do this or whatever. It's like, okay, nobody is saying, that well, there are people who say you can't do this or that, but you know what I mean? Like even the people who disagree with you will acknowledge to some extent, usually, the validity of like what you're saying. Like very few people will say that like a woman shouldn't have more say about, pregnancy than the guy, simply because she does have to deal with it. Like, she has to experience it more than the guy does in that sense, even if they won't agree that that should be the only factor. But the thing is, at the same time, like, there is not just the one factor, and maybe one factor may be more important, but it does not mean it's the only thing. And, like, for example, again, for a lot of people, having protected sex is just more boring. You know what I mean? It's just not the same. And so that's why people do it. And then, somebody makes a dumb decision because they're not thinking straight, because they're two dogs humping, not, a freaking, Nobel Prize winning science, a neuroscientist at that time.
No, you're at the mercy of your bodily impulses.
Right.
We're humans, but it's still nature. Ooh.
Yeah. Like, you're literally just doing something because it feels good. And, it's hilariously like you're following the instinct that only exists to make children while not wanting to have children. It's kind of inevitable that, slip ups will happen. Yeah. But the thing is like, for example, like what you mentioned, like, if the girl doesn't want it, but the guy does, like, say that they're in a relationship or whatever, that would lend much more weight to, the guy being able to have it or go off on his own or whatever, rather than just a hookup. But, like, even if you think about it, that the girl wants it, but the guy doesn't, okay, the girl should be able to keep it, but why does the guy still have to pay for it? If, it's like, it's funny because I was saying this to somebody else. I think I was talking to a dude from Romania, and like, he mentioned, like, isn't that like a Dave Chappelle thing? It's like, yeah, I think I do remember that from one of his stand-ups. It's like, you should be able to choose to. I think it was like, you may be able to choose to kill it. I'm just saying I shouldn't have to pay for it. Yeah, the way that Dave Chappelle said it. So it's like, in that case, like, okay, people have their choices and their responsibility, but if after having sex and having, getting pregnant and whatever, the woman, like, would decide to get an abortion after X number of months, if that's okay, then the guy deciding that he doesn't want to have the kid should also be a valid choice in the same context. But people don't
agree.
Yeah, people don't want to think of it from that rational context, because it always has to be black or white. It has to be one or the other.
Yeah, like, in my opinion, he has every right to say, I don't want this, I want out, and then no responsibilities on him because he doesn't want it. Right. It's if you want the right to say, I don't want this, I don't want to, bear a child, I don't want to be pregnant, I don't want to do any of that. If you have that right, then why should the man not have the same fucking right? If you want equality, then fucking do equality, don't choose.
It's only equality when people get what they want, not when they don't get what they want. It's, that's, and I mean, I think in this situation, like, my challenge is to make sure that I don't, like, veer from one topic to another too easily, because so many of these things, they're interrelated, right? In many cases, they are the same situation happening over and over again, where it's like, there's like the inherent hypocrisy of wokeness is that it cherry picks things in many ways, and that, like, it'll focus on things that will support its, confirmation bias, that will support what it's talking about. So, for example, when you have people that are like, why is it only that, white males do, school shootings and stuff like that? It's like, okay, that's, a fair statistic to mention. At the same time, what about all the violence that happens in inner city areas, which are, predominantly more this or that? It doesn't mean that there isn't a correlation or whatever between another given trend. But if, for example, like, there is a correlation of, like, suicide among a given proportion of people, like, there are going to be certain forms of, like, acting out or extreme, like, just losing your shit, that are going to be more common with women of a given age, women of a given, cultural standing, women of a given nationality, etc., because of what's going on. And so when people focus on, like, oh, it's only white males doing this, like, yeah, well, there are a bunch of freaking gangsters shooting each other up, in a place that you don't care about.
Black on black, you don't want to talk about that in certain neighborhoods where it's like that's all that's happening in certain areas. But
Right.
you know, they just want to argue, oh, well, the whites are doing this, the whites are doing that. And not like overall, but just like you said, people pick and choose their
Right.
battle for their, you know, situation. Like I could be like, oh, it is all white males shooting up schools. Come at me, prove me wrong. And then you could be like, oh, it is, you know, black on black and whatever. Come at me, prove me wrong. And it's like,
Right.
well, that's back both up. So it's like, there's bad fucking people out there of every fucking color. Like, what do you want? And there's only the same races to fight back. So it's like, oh, it's the Asians against the Spanish. And it's like, well, you're going to make that a thing now? You're going to pull those numbers and be like, look at what's happening. Because they can, if they wanted to, you know, go to these areas and look at, like, all you're doing is pulling statistics and going, look at this problem here. But what about all the other ones? Like, take those ones. Oh, that doesn't fit the narrative that you want people to fight about right now. So
exactly.
And like in one of the arguments, one of the debates I watched, they were talking about the trans suicide rates are like 40% or something like that. And you know, one side of the argument was it's huge. One side of the argument was oh, it's because of how they're treated and they're not accepted and blah blah blah. But then it was like, these numbers have stayed steady since when they started taking it, when it wasn't accepted at all. And look at how much it's accepted now. You know what I mean? It's that number stayed the same. So it's not a matter of them being, you know, accepted or not. There's just issues with that certain situation. Of course there is. Like, if I felt like, you know, I wasn't supposed to be in this body and I really felt that, like, you know, I feel like I was born wrong, that's going to mess me up. Right. And I shouldn't take offense to someone saying like, that's probably messing you up, because how could it not, you know? Right. So like to say, oh, well, suicide rate's so high because the way society treats us and because nobody acknowledges us as real people. You're more acknowledged now than ever, or not even you, I'm not even saying from them, just for the sake of the argument. Right. You're more acknowledged now than ever before and accepted more, even though there's still strong opinions on the other side, clearly, you know what I mean? But you're more accepted than ever, but that number hasn't changed. So, you know, like these things exist, but if you say anything against it, well, you're evil or you hate people or you don't want someone to be who they are. And it's like, I personally know someone who's went female to male, but like he's always been like that. And it's nothing weird about it. There was nothing, like, it just makes sense to me and everybody else around this person because it is who they are. You know what I mean? I mean, there's no, like, I'm not saying that they didn't struggle in their own right with it. Like, you know, I wasn't that close with them to know that personally, but they're doing just fine. And they've maintained healthy and a lot of friendships and relationships, and that's okay. But then you have some of them who are just like wild with it, you know, and it's like, at what point am I accepting you as a person, or your, like, I don't, extravagance, not the right word, but that kind of like behavior. Like, you know how you have like types of gay people, and some are like very classy and whatever, and then others are like super flamboyant and, you know, just fun. It's like at that, if I just don't like somebody who's flamboyant, that doesn't mean, oh, fuck gay people. Maybe I just don't like people with super high energy. I'm super high energy. I'm sure I annoy a lot of people, you know, like, but it's not against your choices, who you want to have sex with. That has nothing to fucking do with it. Whether I like your energy or not, it has to do with it. Whether I like you as a person has to do with it, you know? But it's not, I think humans are innately good and they accept people. And I don't think that there's evil people too, but generally, I think we mostly accept each other unless you're just a huge piece of shit. Like the racist people. Yeah, there's racist people out there, but generally, I feel like everybody accepts everybody, you know what I mean? But, you know, the media and activists want to point out specific situations to be like, look at, this is rampant. This is what's happening all over. Yes, it's happening sometimes, but I mean, overall, I don't think it's happening as much as people are making it out to be. Maybe I'm wrong, but you know, I have friends of many colors and a lot of them are like, I've never run into a situation like this, you know? So to say it's happening to everybody all the time, Maybe
Yeah.
not. It is happening. I'm not denying that it absolutely fucking is happening, but sometimes it's not.
Right. Just because like there are guys that treat women like shit doesn't mean every single guy is a piece of shit. Like
Yeah.
it's just, or the
Yeah.
same thing the other way around. And it's like, and again, it comes back to like the emotional maturity of the extremes, because it's like you can't point out, for example, like you said, like that survival rate element without somebody be like, wow, like you're just devaluing the lives. It's like, no, you're just being a child and shouting that this is the case. And when anybody says anything besides completely agreeing with you, you're lashing out like a teenager who's saying, oh, you don't know me, I'm going to love her forever. And it's never forever. You know what I mean? So it's like, like, and the teenagers, it's the best example of it, because teenagers think they know everything and they don't, but they know it, but they don't. And that's another reason why, like, personally, I was never mixed with religion, because faith and all that, it's like, well, you can believe plenty, but be wrong. And like that happens a lot with like these cases where it's like you were saying, to be in a situation where you physically don't feel like the body you're in is the body you're meant to be in, there is nothing normal about that situation. It doesn't mean that you can't, that you couldn't theoretically like get all the surgeries and stuff like that done and be generally normal in that sense. That's again going to be a nuanced topic, but the point being is that it is not a normal struggle to have to deal with. As if normal is kind of like an arbitrary word, honestly. Like normal is really more just a way of saying, of all the things that happen, what is the average of that?
Exactly. Yeah.
So, but at the same time, like you have, like going by the same token, it's like there are people who absolutely like that's like their situation, and that like, I mean, we live in a time when we can change all kinds of different things. So like, why should it even matter? And to a certain extent, you know. But then you have another situation where it's like, dude, sometimes it's just a fucking phase, and people are giving you too much credit. So it's like, imagine giving teenagers, the same people who think that this first person that they have a crush on for reasons they don't know, and they're going to spend the rest of their life with them because you don't know what you're talking about, et cetera, et cetera. They say that they're this. You literally already know that this demographic, this age group, just so often does not know what the hell they're talking about. They don't have enough life experience to be able to balance all these different decisions and such. But we're going to let them decide what their anatomy is going to be and such. Like it doesn't mean that you dismiss everything about it, but you certainly don't allow them to completely change everything about their body when they don't even, they're not even familiar with their body yet. But you literally can't be, because you're still growing, because you're overcome with hormones, you stupid shit.
Well, and my problem is they're like pushing it on children. And if there's a little boy or a little girl who wants to be like, oh, I want to wear a fucking dress, or I want to play with, if they want to do the other gender stereotype activities or dress, however, all the fucking power to them. You know what? Cool. But don't sit them down and be like, little girl, you think you're a boy? You know what? Maybe you might be. Let's talk about that. Because, and then start these hormones and these surgeries before they're even done going through puberty. I'm not even going to fix my dog before they've gone through enough of their cycles with their hormones. Because if I fix my dog too soon, there's going to be fucking problems because they didn't have the proper hormones going through their bodies, and now they can develop cancer, or now these things are going to happen. But you're not going to take that same care with children that I will with my dog. You know what I mean? Like, and to deny something so scientifically proven, that the fact that you have to go through hormonal changes to go from a child to a teenager to an adult because of something they think, fucking no. Wait until at least the hormones are leveled out. You know what I mean? Right. They can, sure, you know what? If you're 8, 10 and you want to be the opposite gender, cool. But let your body finish doing what it's doing before you make those permanent changes. That's all. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just, wait till your body's finished the things that are going to keep you healthy and functioning before you make that change. Because I have no idea. I can't imagine what it would do to be in the process of changing hormones to start injecting the opposite hormones or blocking certain ones, what that would do to a person's development.
Right.
And not into male or female, just in general, human development, like.
Yeah. I mean, because there's gender and then there's sex. And people can say, oh, it's like, it's not binary. It's like, whatever. Like, I personally haven't seen a lot of both on people. Binary, when it comes to sex, is pretty not universal across all species, but like, that's just a really weak ground to argue from. It's like, oh, like, sexual binary. It's like, dude, most people have either or.
They either have an XX or XY.
Yeah, like you can try to spin it all you want, and people can spin anything. Nazis made killing millions, hundreds of millions of people sound like a good idea to, social issues. Right. But that doesn't mean it's true.
That we're on board with that, and then looking back, you go, oh, people think that's never going to happen again. Like,
I feel like we could have had a second draft, like. You know what I mean? Like, not to like make fun of what happened, but more so just like the craziness that like people, like, this is what people can do. And it's like you mentioned, like, you physiologically are born with a given sex. You could say whatever reason about whether or not, that would be the right sex for like the spirit or soul, whatever you want to say. But regardless, there is the physical development of it. Just as sure as our fingers work like this because there is, a bone and muscle and ligaments and a tendon, that is part of the developmental process. And when you think, oh, well, this person identifies as this, so we shouldn't force them to go through the process of developing as that. Okay, theoretically, I understand where that stance comes from. It does not change the genetic reality that this sex is trying to develop in whatever way. And if you decide to mess with that, it is not as simple as, oh, guys have more testosterone, so if we stop it receiving as much testosterone and give it more estrogen, it'll become a woman. This isn't fucking Digimon. It doesn't, like, you can't fucking evolve, you can't evolve Eevee by giving it a different fucking stone.
No.
Yes, Eevee is adorable. All of its evolutions are awesome.
My favorite Pokemon is Eevee.
It's just so cute, yes. It's so cute that I never wanted to evolve, or at least I want it, to have one that never evolves.
Or like, I just want them as pets and I want Eevee.
Exactly. But it's just dumb that people, they don't understand that it is not as simple as, oh, I feel this way and this is my perspective, and in a vacuum, like, there could be validity to this, except real life happens and there are other factors.
Yeah.
And I mean, this goes the other way around too, where it's like when people say, there's man and there's woman, it's like, biologically, yes, statistically that is the case. When it comes to the gender thing, yes, gender is socially constructed. Like, and I personally have no problem with a system that reinforces bearded men should not walk around in dresses simply because I don't want to see bearded men walking around in dresses.
See, that doesn't bother me at all. Like, personally, I'm like, it's not my thing, but right. You know what I mean? That's what you want to do has nothing to do with me. And like, if I see someone like attacking somebody or belittling somebody like that, like, I'm going to defend them. You know what I mean? Whether or not I agree with a certain stance, which again, like I said, I don't, all the power to you. We actually had somebody in Windsor, he was a man, but he walk around in like this dress, but like have something under it where it was like he was pregnant, and he'd walk all over the city, and it was just, he wasn't, I don't know if he was homeless or what it was, but it's just healthy, and everyone's like, fucking weird. And I don't want to see someone hurt this person. You know what I mean? Or maybe
I'm not against people doing whatever. Mm-hmm. For me, it's just when people expect, oh, because I can do all this, you need to like it. And that was always my thing, which is that, like, I don't care if somebody with a Viking beard walks around in a dress. I don't think they should be like harassed or whatever for doing that. I just also don't think that if that person comes up to me and starts flirting with me, that I should have to treat them like a woman.
No,
you know what I mean? So it's like, just respecting people's autonomy, but that goes both
respect our
ways.
opinion, exactly. If
Right.
I'm uncomfortable, even if in the grand scheme of things, I don't have anything to be uncomfortable about. If I feel uncomfortable and I don't want to be around a certain person, weird or not, I can be uncomfortable around, an extremely assertive woman, or, a guy who's a little bit belligerent. You know what I mean? If I don't want to be around a certain person because I'm uncomfortable, I shouldn't be made to be a bad person because I feel uncomfortable. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'll defend their right to be in who they are, and I expect the same in return. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. And you, again, it comes back to like the perspectives of the extreme that people have, which is that you either need to support it and like it, or you're a bigot, which is pretty much, it's like people say, wow, you're like, you're being a little bit, selective or, biased there or whatever. It's like, no, the reason why it's a problem is because people are doing that. And like, it is not an issue about what it is. Because it's the situation is the same regardless of the topic. The topic is just, the factor that's being switched out. Like, which type of plant is it? It's still a plant. You know what I mean? And when people expect things to be a given way, and if you don't go with exactly what they expect, then you're dismissing them. And again, that's why I say that it goes back to emotional maturity, because you think of like how that situation is constructed. This is the case. Well, like I'm okay with you believing that. Like I think that you should be able to without getting like attacked or whatever. It's like, well, but do you agree with it? Like just the way that people talk about it, if you really think about it, if you just examine it, it's needy, it's desperate. It needs to be the case.
You have to agree with me.
Exactly. And if you don't, then, it's like a child is like, they're like, I don't know, going back to the example, like the teenager that thinks they're going to be in love with their first crush for the rest of their lives. If you're not like setting up a trust fund for them for their dream house to live with this person, it's like like you don't believe in them as an individual. It's like,
right.
No, I just know that this person's an asshole, and you're going to see that in like 3 months. Back the fuck up, but like again, like people, they won't consider like anything less than extremes. And it's like, for example, I don't need to like guys kissing to be okay with guys kissing. But like, there is a difference between me seeing guys kissing over there, like I'm in a park or something, and I'm sitting on a bench. And on that bench over there, don't hear anything. I just looking around and I see guys kissing over there. And like, I don't enjoy seeing guys kiss. It's just not a thing for me. Right. So what am I going to do? I'm going to look over there.
Exactly.
Not because I don't approve of it, but no, like, do you like listening to torture porn? No. Okay. As long as nobody's actually
squirrels bang in the park either. You know what I mean? So
right.
I'm not going to like start a fucking thing. No, squirrels doing it in the park. No, I'm not going to fucking look.
Right.
Problem solved,
Exactly. So but that is the thing, is that like people don't have the emotional maturity to just be like, to just understand it. Because the thing is that person's lack of emotional maturity means that when they see that other person just doesn't enjoy seeing that, and so they're not going to because they don't have to, that offends them because they're needy about it, because they do feel this way. And if there's a form of dismissal or disapproval or that they perceive it that way, now they feel like they're being disapproved of. And like all of it comes back to like how it interrelates with the people. Very few things that people get worked up about are actually like ideology based. Most of it is people making a connection that this person isn't like that, which means they don't approve of how I am, which means there's something wrong with me. Yeah. And then they need to think about themselves. So it can't be something wrong with themselves. And so it's this other thing, when in reality, the person wasn't disapproving of anything to begin with. They just don't enjoy it. Right. Like I don't enjoy watching like gory horror movies. Doesn't mean that I think that somebody shouldn't be able to have a whole freaking Blu-ray collection or be subscribed to, like a horror movie.
All horror movies. Ban them. I don't like them.
You're creating serial killers. Like, like just go the full extreme. Like, no, I just don't fucking like watching them.
Yeah. I would fight to keep them around, even though I'm not watching them. Like, you know what I mean? Like I have such a hard time wrapping my head around the fact that people can't just allow people to have their own opinions, tastes, beliefs without making it about them. Like, if I didn't know who you were and you're like, fucking, I hate that purple dresses, am I going to go on a hunt to look for everyone who hates purple dresses all of a sudden? Like, who gives a fuck?
Right.
Like, do you focus on you? And I think maybe that's just what people are scared of. And like what we talked about in the whole relationship things, it was, they don't know who they are. They're not comfortable with who they are. They're not confident with who they are. And that's everybody else's problem.
Right. Because ultimately, and this is why, like, I believe that people in many ways choose to be stupid, because you'll find like the person who makes the dumbest life decisions somehow find a concrete way to justify everything they've done. And the reason is because subconsciously they know all that it's an issue, but that aspect of themselves is putting all of its intelligence into justifying these poor decisions because of the lack of emotional maturity, because to accept that all these things are the manifestation of this stance or this lack of whatever means that they need to face it. And the vast majority of people don't want to face anything about themselves. And so it always has to be something external to themselves, which is also why all these arguments always involve, well, this is what's wrong with you. It's like, if two mansions are getting built on stilts, pointing out the structural like lack of stability on the other side does not change the fact that you were about to die a horrible death when your mansion comes toppling down. But it's like, it's funny enough because I talk about like how I don't really jive with religion, but it's a religious example from the Bible. Because I went to Catholic school and like we had that mass like on Fridays, and it was like, don't point to the splinter in your brother's eye when you can't see the beam in your own, or something like that. And you know, that is very much the situation where people just don't, it's like subconsciously they're aware of what's going on with them, and so that charges their issue with other things. Like the same thing with like religious people, like not religious people, but like the fanatic religious people who are gay, and so that charges, you know, or bisexual, whatever, like that charges their hatred of whatever group, because it's easier to hate this because it's outside of themselves than to like hate themselves directly.
Yeah, and it takes the attention off of them, right? Oh, if I go around beating up all the gay guys, that means I'm not gay.
Right. Human reasoning at its finest once again.
Right.
And people still think that at the age of 12 we know everything. You know, it's like, in either way, like it's the same thing, because again, like you and me, yeah, it's so weird, like when you realize you have like a hair in your mouth and you're like trying to not make it weird. But it's like
weird. I got it though. Fuck
it. Because I think that's like the importance of having people who are like individualists in that regard talking about it, because you know, like we've talked, like mostly we're focusing on like the wokeness of things, but it also goes the other way where it's like you shouldn't be making people like, for example, I'm comfortable saying that like the general notion of what people call it, I would be considered an atheist. Because it's funny because I heard the argument of like, oh, well, to be atheist is just stupid. Like you don't know that there's nothing out there, so you should be agnostic. It's like, well, people who are religious don't know that there's a God out there. They just have faith that it's out there. And theoretically, you would hope that if there was some way of proving that this God or whatever it is doesn't exist, that they would be open to the idea of, okay, there's a world where this doesn't exist. Like theoretically, you would hope that's the case for everybody. So in some sense, you could say everybody ought to be agnostic, which means agnostic is kind of a pointless term in that case. But of course, like, you know, also it doesn't matter because it's just a word. You know, what matters is that you're open-minded. But the point being is that like, we are not on a given side trying to throw daggers at whatever. We're just pointing out situations where like these issues, these fallacies occur, because it's like another thing that people love to do is to say, well, of course you would say that, you're X. You know what I mean? So yeah, so it's like, oh, like my opinion on abortion doesn't matter because I don't have a vagina or a uterus. You know what I mean? And it's like, you don't, like, I'm not a soldier either, but I can still tell you what happened at the Battle of Waterloo. Like,
what about all these sports fans You're not a fucking football player. Who are you to say, oh my God, he fumbled. How could he do that?
Right.
You're on a flight of fucking stairs and you have an opinion about what the football players are doing.
Right. And the way that their second heart attack, like friggin' Chris Farley and like the oldest Saturday Night Live sketches. But yeah, it's like, but that is the thing, is that is another reason why, because a thing that I do that a lot of people get annoyed with is that I find a connected weight to everything people are doing. I firmly believe that how you do anything is how you do everything, in a certain sense, that it says something about you. Like, for me, like, I don't think that like everybody should be slapped just because they walk by like a plastic cup on the ground and don't pick it up. But I choose to pick it up and put it in a garbage can. Like, that's just how I am. You know what I mean? Like, to me, that is what responsibility is for me. That doesn't mean that like I'm going to go around, you know, like cross the street because somebody walks by like a Starbucks cup and didn't like pick it up and carry it for half a mile to put it in the trash can. I don't think
you missed this. I saw you walked right by. What are you
exactly
doing
appropriating, you know, another one of those stupid ass
for the destruction of the planet. Oh.
So it's, but again, like, you know, that would be a manifestation of like people trying to like take control of others, like to make their lives more balanced as they see it. And I think that's a big part of like, it's a big reason why I'm existential, in that I believe that everybody creates their own value rather than there being a form of value that you simply acknowledge. It's a very like philosophical kind of thing, but to me that opens the door to so many people being right because they create the value. And that way people don't need to be right or wrong, because the only wrong is to assume that everybody else has to be your right. You know,
like everybody is right. Whether I agree with it or not, in your life, in your perspective, you are right to you. Right. You know what I mean? Who am I to say you're wrong? It's your life. It's your perspective. You know, I might not agree with it strongly sometimes, but, but again, I'm not going to like tear that person down or go up in arms or take to social media and be like down with fucking whatever. Unless it's animal rights, then maybe I will.
If it would do anything. Yeah.
Right. And that's the thing. And see, like, you know, I used to be like huge into like, you know, feminism and animal rights. And I mean, I'm still obviously support those causes, but I wouldn't consider myself an activist anymore, because unless I'm seeing a situation that I can do something about, me fucking type on the internet to people who aren't listening, what difference is that making? It's not. Unless I'm going down and pulling those pigs off a truck, unless I am going and stopping men from raping women at bars, me sitting here typing on the internet isn't going to do anything. Arguing with people, arguing with people who don't agree with what I'm saying, we're just going to go back and forth, and I'm not making any difference. So it's at that point where it's like, you have to understand who you're talking to and what the outcome of the conversation is going to be. Because if you and I can have a conversation and you can sway me, great. You know what, you just did something, or vice versa. But for me to openly the world, that's not going to make a difference. You know what I mean? Right. Like, I just think people want to make a difference. They don't know how. And so they just
You just buy a megaphone off Amazon, essentially. But I mean, see, I think my perspective on like why people do that is because people like rallying behind a cause. Like, it makes them feel important. And I think a lot of it, again, comes back to a lack of maturity in that regard, because like there's a reason why people are getting offended by others not believing exactly what they believe. It's because they're immature. And I think that a big part of why they use the causes is because they like hiding behind it, because now they can just spew venom out into like the universe. And now it isn't just them being like negative. Now they're just fighting for their cause.
Yeah.
And I think that you know, people like using those causes as shields because it legitimizes them and gives them an excuse to be able to do what they want. Because if you think about it, the vast majority of these people, regardless of what perspective they're arguing, whether it's the left perspective or the right perspective, you know, either way, all they're doing is criticizing.
Yeah.
Like none of them have a solution for problems that is anything besides just like an extreme, oh, like this is how things need to be. Like, you know, if I don't believe that somebody identifying as a cat is real, then I'm a Nazi. You know what I
Absolutely.
mean?
Then there's trans-abled now. I am fully bodily abled, but I identify as somebody who should be in a wheelchair. Now I want the benefits of one, having the wheelchair, getting the spas, getting the money from the government, because that's what I'd identify as. That's a
Right.
real thing right now. Ugh.
And people who actually cannot move their legs are supposed to accept this person rather than, you know, want to beat the shit out of them because, like, motherfucker, I really can't walk.
Right. Even if I wanted to, I fucking can't. And you're going to be like, I identify as someone who can't walk. Bitch, I identify as someone who's vaccinated. Well, I am. But when I wasn't, I identify as vaccinated. You know, let me on this plane. Oh,
Right.
no. But the trans-abled guy, that's cool.
Right.
Like, I don't
Exactly. I identify as a minor, so let me board first. You know what
oh
I
my
mean? Like, let
God.
me
And
get the children's tickets.
so there's one of the arguments for the abortion debate. Ugh. So it was, okay, well, even if it's not a baby yet, if you wait, it's going to be. Someone was like, what if you use that argument for pedophiles? She's not an adult yet, but if you wait, she's going to be. Ugh. It's the same fucking argument, and you can't use it. It's not a
Yeah.
baby yet. It will be, though. That's why we have to protect it. She's not an adult yet, but she will be, so it's okay. What?
Yeah.
I couldn't, I was like, oh, when I heard that, I was like, holy shit.
And even just people's perspective on the things, because it's like, it's funny because, like, even when it comes to, like, the notion of, like, and this was an issue that I've had ever since I was a teenager, which it was like we set arbitrary definitions of things, of, like, for example, like, again, I am not, like, I do not find it aesthetically pleasing to see a man in a beard walking around in a dress.
Right.
It doesn't mean that I think that a man wearing a dress means that he's gay, in the sense that, like, there's the choice of what wearing a dress means. Like, there's that thing. But then if you think of it physically, a piece of cloth that is not split in the middle to have separate things and just has one tube through which your body extends, like, it doesn't matter in that sense. You know what I mean? Again, I don't enjoy seeing, like, hairy people and seeing their legs. I just don't enjoy it. But, like, at the end of the day, it doesn't mean that wearing whatever, like, means that they're this. Like, it physically means nothing.
Yeah. Because you
And
understand that our opinions don't fucking matter. They don't matter. Oh, I think this, cool. And, you know, like, who fucking cares? Like, and same with you. Like, that's why I feel like I can speak so freely, because at the end of the day, my opinion doesn't matter. Like, what I think about you really is none of your business. What you think about me is not, it doesn't affect me. It shouldn't affect me. You know, those are your thoughts, right? Same with the guy in the dress. I don't like it. You know what? Do you? Maybe he's 10 times fucking happier than I am as a human. You know what I mean?
right.
So for someone to be like, fuck that guy, he's weird, he's wrong. You know what? He's probably a lot happier and more accepting of people than you are. So
Right.
who's
Exactly.
you know?
Like, they're just respecting people's autonomy takes people a long way, I think. And again, it doesn't mean that you need to approve of it. And I think that that's, like, something that people, again, that kind of encourages people's extremism, is that they think that if they don't hate it, then that means that they like it. It's like, no, it doesn't mean that at all. It just means that you are okay with it being a thing. Like, I don't I don't care if somebody, like, in terms of, like, being, like, a strong advocate of, I don't know, like a given community or whatever, like, if they want to, like, support it or whatever, like, okay, that's their choice. To me, it's an arbitrary thing because I see people as individuals. But it's like, you know, if somebody wants to become a pastor, I'm not going to say it. Like, I'm not going to go out of my way to, like, say, oh, later you're doing this, that, and the other things. Like, dude, like, if, like, even though I don't believe that like the literal reality that churches and such teach is real, I do believe that there are, like, fundamentally, like, positive social things that can happen with the right communities. and the right kinds of lessons, because I mean, we learn lessons from fiction. So to me, that's what it is. It's learning lessons from fiction. Yeah. And it's not me dismissing it. It's just me saying like, look, this is how I see it. But I do think that like you are having a positive impact on things.
Which there's value in that, whether I agree with the means or the belief, but there's value in it. If that makes you a happier and better person, if that makes you feel stronger, please do more of that. You know what I mean? Right. I'm not religious. I mean, I'm highly spiritual. So like, I mean, maybe you could say it's the same thing.
So I mean, you believe in God, right? Because you said you're spiritual.
Believe in something, whether that's just being a good person or like having your own moral compass, you know what I mean? But just having like a purpose, I feel makes people better people and happier people. When people feel lost and have no direction, you know, that's when bad things start happening. And whatever it takes for anyone to be happy, fucking do more of it. Right. You know, like you want to wear dresses as a guy, fucking do more of it. I will go shopping with you and tell you what ones look good and look bad. You know what I mean? Like do more of what makes you happy and fucking leave everybody alone.
And I think that it's one of the ways, and the shame of all the things that people, the perspectives that people take is that like in some ways, like it's like when somebody makes a good point, but then they go too far. And like you're like when people were arguing with them, you're ready to like jump to their like defense, but then like they go like further and further within. You're like,
can't help you.
Yeah, like if somebody is pointing out like, you know, like okay, like why, like when it comes to like the violence, for example, it's like okay, like we can point out that like, you know, Caucasian guys tend to be like ones who do more like the school shootings, but we're not going to point out that, you know, like inner city people are like shooting each other and stabbing each other and, you know, making money off of like selling drugs to each other all the time. And like, we're going to ignore that. And if I point that out, now I'm a racist or something like that. But then they go like further and say, oh, you know, and it's like, we would just stop letting the damn immigrants in. It's like, dude, you just like stop. Like you made a good point. You stop. Like, you know, like, people can be messed up no matter what arbitrary characteristics they have. It's good. It's a good point. Stop. You know, we don't need to act like the thing that America was literally built on is like also like the thing that's making it fall apart, because now you need to address the reality that, okay, then why should America exist at all? Because it's mostly just immigrants who like combined and did stuff, you know? So just the unfortunate nature that people have to just keep going and going and going.
Talking or a person too much space to speak, then their point is going to be invalid or they're going to lose the argument or something. So it's like, instead of just kind of coming back and saying, no, this is what I think, they're going to keep going and dilute it or make their argument worse or whatever, instead of just like coming back and it's like, nope, this is just, that's it for me. This is
right.
Fact to me. This is, you know, just respect people and then go into something. No, just respect people. You know, you don't have to keep coming up with more things to further prove a point. You can leave your point.
Exactly. Because it's like and I mean, again, like we are animals, like we're not robots. We're not going to stop at the most logical time because like we're, you know, emotionally driven and stuff like that. And yeah, you could say that we're more than animals, but at the end of the day, like we're still going to be affected by the same things that affect whatever else. Like people don't have sex for fun because they're spiritual beings.
Right.
Like that, you know, no, it's just not, you know what I mean? Like we're genetically programmed to desire doing that so that we make people, and we just don't like having to make people. And so we stop it there, but it's like, okay, but acknowledge that that's where it comes from. Like, so it's kind of hilarious because we're trying to be reasonable when naturally like we're still working with the same brain that's like, well, I don't like that caveman and his cave woman's pretty hot, so I think I'll just smash him in the head with a club and be like, yo, like I got all this meat over here, I got a fire, my cave's like,
I got set up.
Yeah, my cave's like 2 times bigger than his. Like we now we have 2 caves. He doesn't need it. You know what I mean? like at the end of the physically speaking, like I think that like maybe like, you know, we don't have as much hair as we used to, but it's like the brains that we have now have not evolved physically that much since we started using fire, like that was the MVP. So uh,
And
it's
I'm sure
almost
there's
like,
parts of our brain that are more active now than there were before. It's all
Mhm.
this emotional stuff that didn't matter before, where it's like, oh no, he doesn't like me. I'm gonna go cry in my room for whatever. Cave woman's gonna be like, fuck that guy, food, cool. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
I think other parts of our brain are like hyper, but I mean that can also just come from our society, the TV, the quick, the less. You put so much value on people and relationships that when it doesn't work out, oh, there's something wrong with, like, there's all these fucking things that weren't applicable way
Right.
back then, and now everyone's all fucked up.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that probably, plays into, like, again, like people's like militant stances when it comes to certain things, because again, like when people get stressed out, it goes back to that same fight or flight response that kept us alive, when we were just hurling spears in the savannas. But it's like people, again, people try to insist on equality when it comes to different things, but it's like at the end of the day, the vast majority of the people don't use their brains that much.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And yet everybody wants to be an activist because it's cool. It's like, it's basically the 1960s all over again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Everybody acts like they're standing for this or standing for that. And it's, it's like cool to be like involved in this and fighting for that and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And at the same time, like people are excusing so much behavior, which is, something we kind of got at when we talked about like relationships and stuff like that. But I think that like it would be interesting to compare like how people think about things now versus how they did in the 60s, when there was also like a lot of civil rights stuff, because it's like,
That'd be fucking nuts. I'm gonna look up those stats for next time.
right? Because
Those
it's like,
things, yeah.
because you just think of like the perspective, for example, like you mentioned, in regards to like feminism and stuff like that. Like, and it's also kind of an example of like people like taking a good point and going way too far with it,
Mhm.
because, it's like being able to say, for example, that women should be able to walk around without wearing like a corset that makes it like impossible for them to breathe, or that, they shouldn't have to bind their feet so that their feet stay permanently small so that they're crippled for the rest of their lives, which is something that happened, I think, in China. Um, like, there are those extremes. And then there's all guys are rapists who are just, perpetuating the patriarchy and all this other stuff. It's like, okay, wait. Agree with you on women should be able to breathe. Like, sports, doctors, awesome. Like I'm behind all this stuff. At what point did I become, like somebody who just necessarily hates somebody who has XX chromosomes,
Right.
and people will go too far with that. And I mean, it's so unfortunate because the people who are, I'm not going to say like moderates or whatever. I don't like using the typical terms because I don't know. It's first of all, it's samey and it's boring, but also it's like I don't know what it's going to mean to somebody else, But it like there are people who are they're still just making good points, but they're getting swallowed up in the babies running around just running their mouths who don't know what they're talking about. They read, I don't know, like the feminist mystique, well, the first, 13 pages of it anyway. And now they're like a master, in their own mind of philosophy. I am a PhD in philosophilism.
If rappers can make up words, so can we.
It's true. Shakespeare, didn't seem to care. So why should we?
Well, like I took women's studies and psychology. I double majored in
Right.
psych and women's studies. And at first I was like, oh my God, look at all this. Like I didn't know. And I got the whole, like, that is mind blowing. And I really think everyone should take like an intro to women's studies courses. But after I started getting into my second and third semester with it, I'm like, this is a little much. I'm like, you're stretching. And that was a big turning point for me where I kind of pulled myself out of my education because I was like, this isn't right. I wasn't just taking what they were teaching me going, I'm getting university education and everything they say is like, absolutely not. I was like, this is fucked up. And I think I'm done with this. So it's like, they get you in the beginning with a lot of stuff that makes a lot of sense, you know, women being raped and the way we treat all the fucking stuff that everybody knows about. But then it's like, even the biology books are sexist because of the way they described sperm as actively swimming and the women's eggs as passively dying. You see the sexism? I'm like, I'm done. That's stuck in my brain as I'm done. Because
The eggs stay in the woman, the sperm leaves the man. There's more movement happening. We don't need to like turn this into like an intellectual debate.
Was right. And it's like they're
sorry to mansplain.
Sexism is in the fucking, I'm like, this is fucking stupid. Like, I can't anymore. So, and that's what these people are running with. You know what I mean? So people, I don't know. It's just, maybe I'm lucky I was aware enough to see what was happening, but I'm like, you're not sucking me into this. And I was changing. I was turning into somebody who was angry. I was seeing something that was wrong in every situation. And I was like, what?
Right.
You need to stop and you need to be reasonable, you know?
But the crazy thing is that change all of that and change sexism to what the Jews are doing and change women into the Germans. And it is disturbing how similar that is. You rope, and we're marketers. We know how this stuff works, is that you rope them in with the common pain points, the things that nobody could really argue, like, you know, rape is not a good thing. I feel like most people are going to go for that. You know what I mean? And like, you know, and then you just like, you lead them further down, further down, further down. And before you know it, you know, people are part of the cult of whatever idea you're talking about. Like they all work the same way.
God, getting into this industry made me see like society so fucking, like I see right fucking through it. I see what they do on the news stations. I see what they do in the commercials. I see what the politicians are doing. I'm like, you're fucking brainwashed. You're tricking people. You're selling people. You are selling people. That's all that's happening. I can see the structure to what you're doing. Everyone's like, they're speaking truth. I'm like, you don't know what's happening to your brain.
Right.
They're doing this on purpose. I see it.
And then you see like the other like you see other things where people are talking about, like you have like the socialist element where they're like saying it's like, oh, you know, it's like it's the class, you know, it's like the rich, like, you know, subverting the classes, whatnot. It's like, you mean like what you're doing by trying to like manipulate groups of people so that you can get what you want. It's like, and then you just see the hypocrisy in all these different perspectives as well, and you just realize they're all like different wings of the same bird.
Yeah,
you know?
I think people who are marketers and entrepreneurs and everyone who kind of thinks outside the box and broke free of the 9-to-5 cycle, you know, blah blah blah, right? But we're forced to think differently and live differently and do things differently, you know? So when you kind of break out of the go to work, watch the news, come home, hang out, have fun, party, whatever, like when you're not doing that every day because our survival basically forces us just to live and think differently, I find it very interesting that, you know, we're able to, you know, make the money we make, but also live a life that most people don't because they're living and thinking the way the system needs them to.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's almost like, I'm having a hard time articulating it, but like people who think differently. So even like the kids in school, they didn't function the same. They don't take in information and regurgitate it to be A students. We kind of see the world differently. And I think there's a lot of power in that. It's just people with the university degrees. Well, they have the university degrees, so we don't know what we're talking about, but they do.
And then you realize just how pointless it is.
That, and I was like, no, you and your university degrees are fucking brainwashed because it was literally happening to me, you know. But when you allow yourself to think differently, you don't get sucked into these narratives that so many people are stuck in because they truly think they're fighting for the right cause. You know what I mean? Like they think they're doing the right thing. So it's hard to, I don't think they're bad people. I think they just think they're standing up for what they think is right, you know, but
misunderstand.
Blindly, yeah. So I have to go. My brother's getting married. I gotta witness it.
Oh, okay. I guess it's kind of important.
A little bit. But I want to do this again because I think we still have a lot more to talk about.
Yeah, definitely.
I have that we need to talk about. So whenever
It's a
we
big topic.
it's big, and I'm so excited to go more into it. And I hope people don't hate me after watching this.
No, I mean, if they did, they'd be discriminating against a strong,
Right.
independent woman.
Right.
Cool. Well, it's always great to have you on here. And yeah, I guess I should have seen that like this was going to be another thing where we just had to do a few calls on it because I mean, it's so much to talk about. So yeah.
I know. Like, I want to talk about like putting the trans people into women's sports and how they're doing like drag shows for children, like all this stuff. I'm like ready to go.
Right. Cool. Well, I guess we will. Yeah, we'll set up another time. And yes, for anybody who's been watching and has an open mind, hopefully you enjoyed hearing a perspective that's more than just or nothing.
And if anyone has anything that they'd like us to talk about or touch on next time, fucking let us know.